Hello, my name is JP Hofseth, and I would like to go ahead and introduce my mechanic to you. We're going to start the game here. Now, the game that we've been working on is Tournamental here in the studio, and I've been working on a mechanic for that game. Test to show you it here. As you notice, there are a couple things that I changed. You'll see lightly grayed boxes or walls, and then these brown boxes on the floor there. Now, these lightly grayed walls are buildable areas. When you try to build with it or interact with it, just using the E key, notice it says I have no resources. But if I turn and gather that wood, I now have resources to build. And that's the crux of my mechanic right there. Um, Given how many resources are plotted throughout the map, the different areas in which you can build, and the fact that the building actually requires some stamina, much like pushing the block does. You can set up different puzzles and different things to make it so that the player has to decide where they're using their resources, where they're building in order to get through the map. Now, going back like that, that'll make it so I can't get all the way to the next bit of resources, but of course, you can always reset and start over. I was inspired to make this mechanic by games such as Space Haven, which is a tile building space game in which you're building a spacecraft, which I thought was kind of cool. And I think I like the idea of having a building mechanic in a game. I would like to build my own sim building game at one point, but this is just kind of a prelude to that. So let's dig into how I did this mechanic and teach you a little bit more about my process here. So here we have my basic map that you just saw. And the first thing I'm going to point out to you is I actually made two interactables in one tile for this mechanic. And then I put in a Niagara system for the cloud that pops up over it. I made material instances and a material for that. And then I have all my sound cues. And then I do have the setup I had for the HUD. So let's first take a look at my interchangeables here, or excuse me, interactables. If you notice, if you're familiar with this tile system at all or not, we have an interactable type here, and really any tile that allows an interactable can be set up to have interactable build or interactable resources on it. One of the reasons I liked or I wanted to make this mechanic is I wanted to maybe build in other things that you might be able to build in the future, such as maybe bridges over pits or back doors through walls or something. I wanted to have a variety of things to build, but right now we're just doing the basic of the mechanic and trying to show you what I have at this point. So if you go into the interactable build, I'll give you a little background of my coding here. We start off by setting the stamina, and then we go through what happens on event interact, and we check resources, we check the stamina, and then we're going to animate our build. And then down here we have the reset our messaging. So the begin play is kind of self-explanatory. So on the event interact, we're going through and we're checking if the player has the resources. If they don't, we tell them, hey, you need resources. If they do, we check, hey, does he have the stamina required? If we don't, hey, you need stamina, or you don't have the stamina, excuse me. And then we set up, hey, this is being built. And we're letting the player know that we disable their movement at that point so that the animation can go through. We're playing our building sound, which is a combination I did of several different construction noises, ranging from hammerings to jackhammering to nail guns. All of this randomly put in at this point to make that construction background noise. So it's never really the same noise twice, which I think adds a fresh perspective to the player. They're not always hearing the same noise over and over and over again. And then we turn on our cloud emitter, which is our Niagara system here, and the material instance here. This section here is what makes our cloud effect. Um, we're mixing in a bunch of things, setting the radius, the rate, and all that, and we're mixing colors here to make it look like a cloud. And with that, we make this material instance. And as you can see, it looks like a pretty much clouds floating in a sphere, and that's the effect that I was trying to go for this is pretty much a big cloud system, and then based off of our speed, our density, the divisor, all these things over here is how we get how thick that cloud is and um, how much it covers the area. And then after the cloud emitter, we tell the tile to build. So that's actually over here. We'll get to that in a minute. And then we turn off that cloud emitter after the building's already been done. And then we use the player stamina. We subtract the number of resources they used. If the player still has resources, nothing happens. If they run out of resources, we set that, hey, they have resources to false. They don't have any anymore. And then we reset our message because we don't want it still saying building at that point. And all this does is run that reset for us. So we can call that at these different points, reset that message, reset that message. Um, that way we're not leaving a message up on the screen, which we all know is a very annoying bug to have. And we're going to go over here to our other interactable. Now this one holds the resources for the builds. So on begin play, we set up an array. Now this array has my resources in it, and this has all the cubes on it. The interactable has the 4 cubes, and then we pretty much just set the cubes either to being hidden in game or not, depending on how many resources we actually want shown on that. Um, and that number is actually this number of wood. So that is instance editable. So out here, if I clicked on the resources, I could tell, hey, I want 4 pieces. Hey, I want 2 pieces, 1 pieces, 3 pieces, whatever it is, and it'll go up to the 4 blocks that I have to build or to show. And then we're disabling the player movement so they can watch the animation. We set the, hey, you're gathering resources, and then we go down to the gathering event down here. And all this pretty much does is set whether or not those cubes are now hidden in game. So it just simulates them picking up those boxes. So if they have all 4 of them here, it'll start down here. Otherwise, it'll skip down to where it needs to in order to just disappear the boxes that are there. And then at the end of that, we increment however. So at the end of each section, we're incrementing the wood. That way it counts up per box being removed. That way it looks like it's being gathered in real time, and then we reset that our message there. And since there's no more resources in that tile, there's no reason for the person to not be able to enter the tile, so we set that tile to enterable at that point. And so after we gather the resources, we're enabling our player movement, and then we're setting, hey, they have resources, they can build. So on the tile build here, at first we have it so that they can't enter. Can enter is turned off. So we're calling our parent, we're saying, hey, no one can enter the square. But as soon as they're building a door. And this is all this tile will build at this point is a door. I thought about adding later on more tiles to build other objects, or maybe even adding a HUD on that lets you select what you want to build at what tile. But at this time, that's all I have is just the door. So you can then enter it because you can go through a door. And this reveals the items that are hidden normally in game, the door frame, and then the cube that is normally there is hidden. So all I'm doing is I have all these components already there. I'm hiding the ones I don't want the player to see, and then revealing them when I do want them to see it. And then I'm setting up how long I want the delay for. I'm telling the player, hey, I captured the player here because I was going to do something with that, but I haven't done anything with it really at this point. I could have done it down here and set their move back, but I haven't at this point. So this could actually be removed right now unless I do. I was going to try to have the door open in the direction the player was facing, but I hadn't gotten to that yet. And then we have the door animating here. So we have door opening, we have the door rotating, and rotating to its relative position, and then we're re-enabling that player's movement. And that's all we're doing with that. All it really takes care of is the door animation and then re-enabling the player's movement. And that's all that tile takes care of. Again, the Niagara system here, I played around a little bit with the settings to get the ones I want for the cloud system. If you notice, it does kind of appear and disappear at different rates, and you can actually set the different particle states and rates all by clicking on these things here. I actually got into particle building with my last mechanic on level design 2 and built several spark particles and learned a bit about this system at that time. And I'm trying to keep that knowledge to make more particles and keep it going. And of course, most of my sounds are just random sounds. I'm combining a bunch of sounds that I picked up for construction, different background music, different gathering sounds, picking up mostly boxes, um, different doors being opened, and that way they're never the same one, and the player gets a little bit of variety. And then I have the HUD here, which is pretty much just a vertical box with a couple text sections that populate based off of, you know, whether the player has the message being sent through. And the message is actually from the player pawn. I set up a message in player pawn. I just called it string message. And all it does is pass through what the message is from the player. So if you notice, I'm not actually calling it anywhere in here. I just set the message up in player pawn, and I'm using the player pawn as kind of just a communication system, which I could have used something else for, obviously, but since the player has to interact with all these things, I'm already having to get a reference to the player, and so I'm just saving it back into that player and then taking it back out of that player for the HUD. That way I'm not creating another system to have to communicate. I'm already using a blueprint that's communicating with both of these already. Why not use that? Or at least that's my thinking on that. So I'm just passing it through the player pawn um, just so that it's easier than having to make another communication system for me. And then I have the get message text is really the only one that I have on here. And then the get resource text. So this tells the player, hey, this is how much wood they have. So I already always have that wood up there, and then I'm getting the number of wood they are from there, appending it to it, and adding it onto the screen. And this is just getting that string message that is from the player. And that's my mechanic. I hope you enjoyed watching all of this. I look forward to your feedback. I look forward to any questions anyone might have. Um, I'm hoping to expand upon this on my own and adding more building features to the game so that I can create my own building sim. I also want to add other resources to it. That way, maybe the person, instead of making a wood door, they make a steel door, or they make a steel bridge, or different things of that nature. So I look forward to hearing what you think, and I want to thank you for the time of watching my presentation. And again, my name is JP Hofseth, and thank you very much for watching my video.